In 2017, Parks Canada placed 17 plains bison into the backcountry of Banff National Park. This is a hugely significant project because most plains bison herds that exist today live on small patches of land that can only support a small number of animals. The Banff herd, by contrast, will be able to support up to 1,000 animals living in a 1,200 square kilometer reintroduction zone, where they will roam unfenced and will be subject to predation. And this is cool because it allows them to continue their traditional role as ecosystem engineers. So what that means is that historically, plains bison and fire were two of the big forces that contributed to the expansion of grassland ecosystems across North America. And then you can imagine, right, if we put bison back onto any landscape, they are going to radically change what's already living there. So it's important for, say, other managers who are thinking of putting bison back onto the landscape to understand how these changes are going to affect what species are already living there, right? You can imagine if you have an endangered species on your land, you don't want the bison to put them at further risk of extinction. Now, we want to learn from reintroductions like Banff's herd, but they pose an interesting challenge because they've only been on the landscape for 5 years and we only have 62 animals. So one of the ways we can start learning from them is to look at these early signs through indicators in the ecosystem. Specifically, what I'm interested in looking at are birds. See, birds are sensitive to changes in their environment. And specifically, they're sensitive to changes in vegetation structure. Think like the height of a plant. So when bison go across the landscape, they don't graze in a uniform pattern, right? They're not like lawnmowers. They go to certain areas, they graze them really heavily, and other areas they graze a lot more light. And what my project does is I set up a bunch of monitoring stations across this reintroduction zone. Some of them are in those heavily grazed areas, other ones are in lightly grazed areas. So we go in and we say, okay, based on the data from the GPS collars that the bison are wearing, we know that they're spending a lot of time here, so we're assuming it's heavily grazed. We see this change in the vegetation community. It's a lot shorter than, say, the lightly grazed area. Now we link that heavy grazing to then a change in the bird community. So we look at the diversity, the number of species there, and the abundance, so the number of members of each of those species. And we can say, all right, if we have this level of grazing on the landscape, we see this change in the vegetation community, and the bird community responds in kind. This provides other managers in other areas a bit of an early indicator, right? It gives them some information as to how bison affect other species in the landscape. It allows us to continue to reintroduce these wonderful animals across their former range in a way that is healthy and doesn't compromise what's already there.